It's Sunday morning, and we're protecting military families on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's news and talk. As always, Casey Kurtz, joined by Chris Brochu, the owner of Brochu Law. Chris, what's going on a Sunday morning, man?
Good morning. How are you, Casey?
I am good, man. Let's start off as we always do, the Brochu Law Second Opinion. Tell the people, if they don't know about it, what you can do for them with your second opinion.
Absolutely. We have a bunch of important stuff for our service members and veterans that have recently, they're close to getting up to a deadline. We've got the Sweet versus Cardona case to get student loan repayments reimbursed or dismissed entirely for those service members and veterans that attended for-profit schools that are on that list and are either class members or post-class members. We also have, obviously, the new Camp Lejeune bill that it was signed by the House and Senate and then kicked back because of some financial piece that I believe will still be signed into law. But essentially, what we do at Brochu Law and what I pride my firm on is the fact that we give our service members, veterans, and military families the second opinion. And the second opinion is quite simple. If you went to a doctor and your doctor told you, all right, Casey, you have X, Y, and Z, and you wanted a second opinion, you'd go to a different doctor to just make sure that yours got it right.
Double check.
We offer the same thing. So if the VA has told you this is all you're entitled to, if your VSO has told you this is all we can get you, if you've got a question about your benefits, your legal rights, anything at all, and you're a military family or a civilian consumer that has a question, we're happy to review it. We're happy to take a look. And obviously our consultation's free. The only way that we would move forward is if we both decided to enter into a fee agreement. Obviously there's no upfront costs, right? We advance all costs on behalf of our client. And if we decide to enter into a fee agreement together, the only way that we get paid is if you get paid, right? So it's all on a contingency fee basis, no fee unless you win. So with that being said, today we've got to talk about an important issue. And the reason is there's a class action that was filed by Harvard has this student predatory lending department. It's incredible. They go after these for-profit schools that screw low-income students, veterans, basically preying on people to try to get certain degrees. And how they do that we'll talk more about, but skewing gainful employment numbers and sending misleading information, using those high-pressure sales tactics that we've seen. And the main reason we want to talk about it is whether you're in this class under Sweet versus Cardona or you're a post-class member, if you're a military family, a veteran, or a service member that attended one of these for-profit schools, and I'm going to actually literally list them, top of the hour, bottom of the hour, so that you can hear if you attended one of these schools, you should file a borrower defense to repayment claim. We'll tell you where to find that as well. But our roadmap for today is what's the class action about? Where, how do you file a borrower defense to repayment? What are those claims? Who does it cover? Who are the class members that it covers and who are the post-class members? And then, where do you file a claim? When's the deadline? All of those things.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover all of that, but you just mentioned it. You talked about the military families that could be impacted by this, which is why this is important to you. Also, you have a personal connection to this, so we'll get into that in a little bit, but you mentioned it. We're only 4 minutes in at this point. Go ahead. Give the people the list of schools. If you hear one of these schools and you attended there for any amount of time, it should set off a red flag, right? And then listen more about the conversation we're going to have.
And I'm going to go through these as quickly as possible, and I won't be able to get through all of them, but certainly the ones that are most familiar.
Yeah.
You've seen them on the billboards. You've seen the ads.
Sure.
I remember seeing these even as a kid, but All-State Career School, Allentown Business School, American Career College, American Career Institute, American College for Medical Careers, American Commercial College, American National University, American University of the Caribbean, Anthem College, Anthem Institute, Argosy University, Arizona Summit Law School, Ashford University, ATI College, ATI College of Health, and all of the sister schools. Bowder College, Beckfield College, Berkeley College, Blue Cliff College, Brantford Hall Career, Brightwood Career, all of the sister schools, if there are any. It looks like there are a few. Brooks College, Brooks Institute, Brown Institute, California College, San Diego, California Culinary Academy, Capellas University, Carrington College, Infalaw, Chamberlain, which would cover Charlotte School of Law, Florida Coastal School of Law, and Arizona Summit School of Law, Chicago School of Professional Psychology, College America, Collins College, Chamberlain University, Concord Career College, Cooking and Hospitality, Court Reporting Institute, Daymar College, DeVry College, and all the sister schools, Dorsey College, Empire Beauty School, Everglades University, Florida Career College, Florida Technical College, Fortis College, Gibbs College, Globe University, Grand Canyon University, Gwinnett College, Hallmark Institute of Photography, Harrington College of Design, Harris School of Business, Independence University, International Academy of Design, ITT Technical Institute, Kaplan Career Institute, Kaplan College, Kaiser University, Kitchen Academy, Le Cordon Bleu, Lehigh Valley College, Marinello School of Beauty, McIntosh College, MedTech College, Miami International University of Art and Design. There are several long ones here. Mount Washington College, National University College, Orlando Culinary Academy, Pennsylvania Culinary Institute, Purdue University Global, Radians College, Remington College, Roberts Finance Institute of Florida, Ross University School of Medicine, Salter College, Sanford Brown College, Scottsdale Culinary Institute, South University, Stevens Henniger Star Career Academy, Texas Culinary Academy, the Art Institute, Tucson College, University of Phoenix, University of the Rockies, Virginia College, Walden University, Washington Business School, Western Culinary Institute, Westwood College, Wilford Academy, Wright Business School, Wright Career College. There are many, many more on this list. If you want to find it, go to predatorystudent.lending.org. It's got the complete list. The ones that I was going through, frankly, were either short to read or ones that I've seen a lot of advertising for. Yeah. The one thing that they have in common, they are for-profit schools, and unlike not-for-profit schools, for-profit schools are required to report and comply with certain gainful employment measures. Basically, what that means is when you graduate from a school, what's your likelihood that you get a job? These for-profit schools are supposed to screen these applicants to figure out if they're getting jobs in their degree field. And what we're talking about here today, folks, is not the, how do we, basically prevent everybody's student loans. We're talking about specifically colleges that the Department of Education and United States Attorney's Office and likely the Department of Justice have identified as offering misleading or predatory targeted information to our citizens and basically defrauding taxpayers along with these students. And the main reason is, here's what they're doing. They are, they being the Department of Education, is going to forgive these student loans for some of these students that went to these schools, reimburse any student loan payments for these for-profit institutions, and then go after these for-profit institutions to recoup the money that had been taken out. So it's not, necessarily the taxpayer holding the bag. It is, from, again, what my understanding of this lawsuit, it is, okay, we're going to figure out who was on this list that went to these for-profit schools. We will cancel their debt, and then we'll go after those for-profit universities to recoup those financial aid dollars.
Absolutely. So let's get into the details of this on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's news and talk on a Sunday morning, protecting military families with Chris Brochu. Chris, you explained it to me a little bit. It's a class action. If you went to one of these schools, just if you can, give just a vague overwhelm, like when did you have to go to school, all this information that people will need if they want to get in on this?
So I think the main reason why it caught my attention is it's been all over the news. And the first thing I'm looking at, I'm like, did they forgive student loan debt? Right? That was my first question. And then once I read the articles, and then I went to that predatorystudent.lending.org, that student loan website that on Harvard's website, and I read about it and I said, oh, they're just forgiving the loans to go after the for-profit institutions that, defrauded students, misled students. And what surprised me was when I was reading a lot of that, there were findings that these for-profit schools were actually targeting our military. So Corinthian College, it's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. They're actually using our military's logos to solicit our military families to go to school there. Those have all been forgiven under the law, rightfully so, and they're going after Corinthian College. From my understanding, they're going to go after them and recoup that money. And the main reason that they go after veterans and military families is these schools are set up where the more money that they take in, the more money that they make. So they need people that are going to either take out high value loans, which is usually low income students or students that, are full time and they're unable to work. Or they're going to target our military families and military community. Why? Because they get certain educational benefits, all of the post 9/11 GI Bill and all of there are several iterations of the GI Bill, but those are guaranteed checks that the schools don't have to worry about. So they target these military families and they promise all of these things about how, your salary will be this when you graduate and how many opportunities you'll have and how your degree is going to be worth something. And the reality is the students that get through are left holding the bag. They don't have those opportunities. And there are a lot of them that are stuck with $20, $30, $50, $100,000 in student loans that never got a degree, right? Their school shut down halfway through their degree. It's really sad, quite disgusting. But when I read it, I thought to myself, I'm like, man, we got to get this on one of the shows and talk about it. And our military families, you have to, if you went to a for-profit school for anything, from an associate's degree to a medical degree, you have to look at this list and figure out if there's a way for you to file a claim. Again, I'm not sitting here giving you legal advice, telling you how to file it or what to, but I want you to look into it because you may be leaving money on the table if you don't.
Absolutely. And you said you want military families to look into it. Is there a time range? Is this if you went to one of these schools at any point in time, look into it? Or is this a kind of whittled down window that if you went from here to here, you should look at?
I'm not entirely sure if there is a time frame, but what I will tell you is I believe it was in 06 or 07, the federal government had sort of lifted the cap on the amount of direct loans that students could take out. And again, I think that was for mostly postgraduate degrees, but also for bachelor's degrees. And what that did is beforehand, you had this cap, right? You could only get X amount of money from student loans that are backed by the federal government. Well, institutions know, well, if this is the amount that you can get backed by the federal government, this student isn't going to qualify for a private loan. So we can't set our tuition if the federal, I'll give you an example. Let's just say for fun, I don't know what the actual number is, but if they only give $20,000 a year in federal student dollars and the school charges $40,000, there aren't going to be a ton of kids that will go, or a ton of students that will go. So what they do is the school usually will correspond their annual tuition or yearly tuition with the amount of federal dollars available to students. 06, 07, what do? They lifted the cap, meaning you could charge whatever you wanted. To me, I don't want to say it's kind of the same old song and dance, but you've got these companies that are whether it's a company, an insurance company, a for-profit institution, it's the same kind of thing over and over and over. And I think with this particularly, it's particularly egregious because of what they're doing to our military families that put their GI Bill that could have gone to their child or their other degrees to a different institution. So.
Absolutely. A couple of things off of that. When you talk about the capped versus the uncapped and how it changed, is that how, from that point on, that's how people got $60,000 in debt because they can just charge whatever they want, pretty much?
I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that, inflation has been an issue, over the past several months, but over the past 20 years, we didn't have an inflation problem the majority of the time, yet our student loans were going up as if we were in some crisis. And I don't think that the amount of money for tuition from, say, 1985 to 2010, I don't think that there was that great of a change. I could be wrong. If you're an economist and you disagree, please call me. But I think that these are part of the reasons why we have the bills that we have today for student loans,
Yeah, I hear you. With going back to the GI Bill that you were talking about a little bit, with obviously if you use that money for college tuition and you do recoup it, is there a requirement you got to use it again for that type of thing, or you get the money and you get the money?
What's really interesting is I don't think that they've hashed this entire thing out, and I'll talk in a minute about Sweet versus Cardona, that case out of Northern District of California, how we got here and where it's headed. And again, I wasn't part of that class, but I've read it, and I'm really interested in kind of discussing it with you all. But the bottom line is, if you have somebody that went to one of these schools, regardless of when they went, they should look into filing a borrower defense repayment application. And what was your original question? I had another tidbit that I wanted to ask, but primarily here's the bottom line. We're not, based off of what I read, they're not so concerned with what the time period was, but the argument and the reason why it became a class action is because you had all of these students, close to 200,000, that had filed borrower defense repayment applications with the Department of Education on the student loan website. And the federal government had not decided them. They either denied them without giving a reason, or they just left them in limbo. So the members of the class currently are basically the people that had filed these applications for borrower forgiveness and never received a response. And they date back to, I think, 2017.
Okay. A couple minutes to go before we get to the top of the hour on 104.5 WOKV. So we will talk about Sweet versus Cardona at the other side of the hour. But, Chris, you brought this up to me before we started the show, and you kind of talked about it there, but I want you to go a little bit more in depth if you can. You spoke about how people were close to getting their degree and all of a sudden this school shuts down. You have friends that had that as a real life example, right?
I did. I know at least two of my friends that were attending a school in North Carolina called Charlotte School of Law. And what happened is they were, one of them, I don't know if they had gotten kicked out or what happened, but the other one was close to finishing his degree. And the doors shuttered one day. You go to school and there's no way to go to class, and they had been promised that these loans would be wiped away. And I don't know what the status is for either one of them, but I think that it's really interesting because you have a lot of students in that situation that racked up a ton of debt, never got a degree, and were left holding the bag.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know how they were able to do that, but that's the predicament that we're in. So
yeah. I mean, I can't imagine, like, nobody loves going to school, right? But when you work so hard for something and you're that close and you pull on the door and it's locked, I mean, it's frustrating at the very minimum.
And these guys are hard workers too. They didn't deserve what happened to them.
Right.
And again, just it's greed. It's disgusting, but the amount of money that these for-profit schools had made and utter disregard to the lives that they're affecting, it's disturbing.
Absolutely. This is 104.5 WOKV Jacksonville's News and Talk. We got more to talk about on this situation. This is a very new topic, folks, by the way, so we're working through it with you, but Chris thought it was important, and it is, so we want to tell you about it, and we're still digesting some of the information as we go. But Chris, before we hit our first break, go ahead, give some of those schools one more time. The full list, by the way, predatorystudent.lending.org. You can find it. But Chris, give some of the highlights, some of the well-known schools that people know, and maybe set off a red flag in somebody's head.
Yeah, I think DeVry, ITT Technical Institute, Infolaw, Argosy University, Le Cordon Bleu, Grand Canyon University, Ross University School of Medicine, Kaplan College, Kaplan Career Institute. I think Everglades University, Empire Beauty School, Tucson College, the Art Institute, right? I mean, I think if you go and read this list, you'll see not only if your school's on there, but you'll see a lot of schools that you've seen on TV or other ads or
Sure.
gimmicks. So I would just encourage you to go on to predatorystudent.lending.org and take a look there and make sure that you're not leaving something on the table for you and your military family.
Absolutely. It's definitely something to check out. So we've got more to talk about on this topic, Sweet versus Cardona. Chris will break that down on the other side of this break. This is 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk. We're protecting military families on a Sunday morning. Casey Kurtz, Chris Brochu, the main man, on the other side. We'll be right back. Stick with us. Welcome back on a Sunday morning, the 7 o'clock hour on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk. Chris Brochu, protecting military families as we do on Sunday mornings. And today we're talking all about student loans, forgiveness, how you may be able to get some forgiveness on your student loans. Chris is explaining that for you. If you missed any in the first hour, go back and listen, WOKV.com, or you can find a video version on the show on Chris's website, thanks to our guy Justin over at Nova Productions, hooking that up, by the way. Chris's website, brochulaw.com, YouTube as well, right?
That's right, Casey.
So you can find it anywhere as Chris becomes an influencer, but really he just wants to influence you to make good decisions. And if you need law help and you're a military family, to contact him, send him an email, case@brochulaw.com. And what he really wants you to email him about is if you have a question and looking for a second opinion. Chris has founded the Brochu Law Second Opinion, and he wants to help you if you think you need help. Chris, what is that second opinion?
Casey, I don't know if I'll ever become an influencer. That's not on the horizons for me. But
I got a feeling, Chris.
But I like to help people, and I like to tell them about their rights. And the second opinion is part of that. So when I get a call from someone and they say, "Can you tell me if I'm leaving any benefits on the table, particularly military families? Can you tell me if I'm entitled to this or if I can get an increase? The VA told me this is all I can get. I'm at 30%. Can I get above that? I heard from, XYZ that I don't have a legal claim. Is that true?" If you give us a call, our free consultation, we'll cover everything, every question that you have about your legal rights and benefits. And that second opinion will at least give you the peace of mind to know that you got your question answered, or maybe we've given you an idea of where you can go from here. And the other part is, if we do discover something, right, we discover that you've left a benefit on the table or you've got a legal right to something, if we decide to enter into a fee agreement together, it's always on a contingent fee basis. So there's no fee unless you win. We advance all costs on behalf of our clients. And everything that we talk about and discuss, if you have a question about any of it, feel free to give me a call. I mean, we've been hitting two topics really hard lately. We talk about Camp Lejeune, and then this morning we're talking about the Sweet versus Cardona. The two main reasons are Camp Lejeune is incredibly beneficial to a number of families that serve between 53 and 87 in Camp Lejeune in the state of North Carolina. And basically, it affects, I think, at least 1 million families that were drinking that toxic water. Cancers, leukemia, multiple myeloma, birth defects, heart conditions. I mean, it's absolutely terrible, terrible diseases and illnesses. But we're trying to really just spread the word out there. It's a new bill. It was passed by the House and Senate, and then it was kicked back because there was this sort of financial component. If you have a question about Camp Lejeune, if you served there, you have a family member that served there, you were a child, a spouse, a civilian worker that drank water there for 30 days or more, give us a call. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the bill and see what we can do. The Sweet versus Cardona that we're talking about today is very new. The settlement between the Sweet class and the Department of Education was actually signed on June 22nd, 2022.
So very recent.
Very recent. And part of the reason why we are still digesting this and trying to kind of just spread the word is because there's an important deadline. If you went to one of these for-profit schools, you've got to submit an application for borrower defense if you believe that you have a claim. And I would encourage anybody to go on the website and read about it. File one if you believe that you're entitled to it. You've got until the final fairness hearing, which is, I believe, on July 28th. So that's not a ton of time here, folks.
It's barely a month, right?
Yeah. If you want to file a claim and have some of the protections from that Sweet versus Cardona class, you've got to do that before the final fairness hearing. And I just want to break down briefly too. Sweet versus Cardona, how do we get here, right? How did these students that Sweet represents as one of the class representatives, how did they get here? Well, they went to a bunch of for-profit schools, for-profit undergraduate, associate degrees, technical schools, right? Beauty and ITT Tech. I believe there were some medical schools on there, some law schools. How did we get here? Well, what the Department of Education found is that many of these for-profit schools were not leading students or being fair to students. They were misleading with marketing. They were being deceptive with their admission practices, their gainful employment numbers, the amount of tuition that students were paying, the amount of salaries that they would get after they graduate, right? And when all of these class members, I think it's close to 200,000, filed a application with the Department of Education under the financial aid website, that FSIA, I think it was, or at least that's your ID number. They file these borrower defense to repayment applications and nothing happens. They don't get it denied. They don't get accepted. They're just in purgatory. And what Sweet did, this class, is they forced, by way of the federal courts in the Northern District of California, they forced the Department of Education to come to the table and explain or discuss why this wasn't happening. And it was actually Sweet versus Betsy DeVos, but Betsy DeVos was obviously no longer the Department of Education, in charge of Department of Education. So now Cardona is, so they amended that. But the biggest thing to know is that if you had submitted a borrower defense to repayment application on or before June 22nd, 2022, and your school is on this for-profit list, my understanding is you would have your student loans completely wiped away, and you would have the ability to recoup any of the payments that you've made. And this affects a ton of military families and a ton of veterans that were using their GI Bill as payment for their for-profit education. And here's the kicker. The Department of Education isn't even necessarily leaving this to the taxpayers, they're going to waive the debt for these students and then go after these for-profit schools to recoup it. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding of that.
Yeah, and obviously it's a very new situation. So like we said in the first part of the show, we're working through it. Chris has given you the information he knows. By the way, he mentioned the schools. We'll give you some of those before the show ends, but you can just go look for them yourself. If you want to, predatorystudent.lending.org will show you a whole list of the schools and if it's a school that you went to. Chris, there's two things off of what you were just saying that interest me. You said that it's being tried in California or something.
Yeah, it was filed in Northern District of California.
Does that matter to somebody that went to school in Florida? Like, does any of that matter, or you can just, if you're in with the class, you can just jump in?
It does not. And I've filed class actions before. I've had one in Southern District of New York. I had another one in Middle District of Florida. When you have a class action, you're either filing it as a state class or you're filing it as a nationwide class. And in this particular case, it's a class against the Department of Education. So they're not going to shuffle through what state you were in or what college you went to necessarily. It's essentially, did you file a borrower defense to repayment? And did the Department of is your school on this for-profit list? And did the Department of Education fail to respond or deny your application? So that's a really good question. And usually this is probably too much civil procedure for you, but usually you just file in wherever state your claimant is from. So Sweet, I believe, went to college and is a resident of California. My guess is probably lives in the Northern District, and that's usually your starting point. And based on what I've read, as long as you filed that borrower defense to repayment, you went to one of the for-profit schools listed, and your application was submitted on or before June 22nd, 2022, you would get your debt forgiven.
There you go. So California all the way to Florida, all the way up to Maine.
That's right.
At the top. Anyway, any state, if you went to one of these schools, you can get in on this. But Chris, I can't get past this part of it. June 22nd to July 28th. That's it. Like, why is it so? I feel like I'm seeing commercials for class actions that are like years ongoing. This, you barely have a month to file. Is that to try to not get everybody in on it they might not find out about it? Like, do you have any idea why it's such a short time frame? Because it seems to me, as a non-law person, ridiculous.
I wasn't part of the settlement communication between Sweet's attorneys and the Department of Education. But what I will tell you is they've identified, and this is all public knowledge. I mean, you can look up that student lending website that Casey just gave. What is it again, Casey?
predatorystudent.lending.org.
It's got all the class action documents. It's got a consumer helpline. It's got everything that you would need if you went to one of these for-profit schools. And the bottom line is they've got a settlement agreement that identifies what they call class members. And for you to be a class member, you would have had to have filed a borrower defense to repayment application on or before June 22nd, 2022, right? So we can that's who's a class member, those 200,000 or close to 200,000 students. They also have what's called a post-class member. What is a post-class member? Well, it's somebody that submits an application after, so June 23rd, 2022, but before
July 20th.
Final entry. Mm-hmm. I think final entry of the settlement agreement. The fairness hearing on July 28th is basically just the judge taking a look at it and saying, all right, here's what the department's offering. Here's what Sweet's getting. Is that fair? And if it is, approved. Now, there are other components to this, right? You're going to have people intervening that are maybe like, this isn't fair. You're going to have people potentially objecting, which would mean this would go up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, right? That happens. There's an infamous objector, and I won't say his name because I don't want to give him the credit, but that file these objections. But the bottom line is you want to submit your application if you're going to before this is closed, and the fairness hearing on July 28th may be the date that it closes. It may not be, but you're better safe than sorry. And I think the main reason is to curb the amount of if you've received notice that you're in this borrower defense to repayment, or now you have post-class notice and you want to file an application, it's very kind of restricted and should be basically just contained to this time period. Now, one of the arguments I heard that I agree with is, well, if you went to one of these for-profit schools, and obviously the department knows because they've got records of all of that, why didn't you receive notice that you may have this borrower defense to repayment available? That, I think, is a great question. I'm not entirely sure, but that's one of the things that I've seen batted around, and I tend to agree with that. So
104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk on a Sunday morning, protecting military families with Chris Brochu, and we are talking about Sweet versus Cardona, student loans, how you might be able to get them forgiven if you fall into certain categories. And really what we want you to do is predatorystudent.lending.org. There's going to be a list of schools. If you went to one of those, go back and listen to the whole episode because you're going to need all the information that Chris is giving you. Chris, you talked about a little bit about it. There we go. Class members, post-class. Is it different for what class members could get out of this versus the post-class members? Will one get more than the other?
Great question. From my understanding, if you are a class member, meaning you filed a borrower defense to repayment application, to recover either money you've paid or student loans that you have outstanding at one of your for-profit schools, you would have that completely forgiven and reimbursed. If you are a post-class member, meaning you filed before or after, on or after June 23rd, 2022, but before the class is closed or approved by the court, you would have certain rights under the 2016 Obama era regulations. And my understanding is you would have a decision made on your application within 36 months. If you didn't receive, either acceptance or denial based on your application within 36 months, then it was automatically forgiven. That's my understanding.
Wow. Okay. And you kind of touched on it there a little bit, but I had this question. So you mentioned 36 months there, but for the class members who are obviously fitting into this, is it as simple as that money is going to hit real quick after the decision's made? How long will this take for people to see some of that money finally come back to them?
I'm not entirely sure. It's certainly in the settlement agreement, and I don't know candidly, what it says verbatim, but I believe there was somewhere in there, within 120 days that after, everything was approved by the court, that the Department of Education would have to approve or, cancel that debt. As far as the repayments go, right, let's say you paid $10,000 towards your student loans and they're now reimbursing. I'm not entirely sure when you could expect that repayment, but I think for the military families that have outstanding student loans from one of those for-profit schools, I think that within 120 days, if you're part of that borrower defense to repayment class, I believe that you would, you could look on your portal and it would be gone. It would be off your credit. Here's the other part. If you were in collections, if you had a default, if you were late on, we haven't even talked about this. If you were late on that, one of the best parts, and I had seen this in some of the consumer cases that I did, one of the settlement terms is you actually get what's called trade line deletion. What's that? Well, if you look on Equifax or you look on TransUnion or one of the credit bureaus, they would delete the negative reporting, which in some instances could raise your credit rating by 40 or 50 points.
Wow.
Which for some people that might get them into the average to good bracket or good to above. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a credit expert, but I have seen that before, and that is part of the settlement as well. So
That's an interesting part of it that I had not considered, the credit aspect of it. So yeah, that's another important part of this. Chris, I want to ask you something about your personal relationship with this, but obviously we talk a lot about military families on this show. So before I ask you about that, just tell the people that might be listening, the audience that you have grown, the military community, how they could be impacted by this, and if they think they are, what they should do.
So I think in the research and reading that I've done, the biggest thing that I took away was most of these for-profit schools were targeting low income and military and people that were either had access to money to go to, student lending or higher education, or people that maybe needed to take out a ton of loans to be able to afford to go, right? Because they had to take out living and certain housing expenses and things like that. And what really struck me is that you hear these stories. I mean, the Corinthian College one, I know I talked about it earlier, but it just startled me at how brazen it was. They're using the military's logo in their advertisements.
It's wild.
And they weren't approved to do it, right? They're using, join today. It's like the Go Army logo. It wasn't the Go Army. I can't remember which one it was. I looked up and I'm just like, you can't do that. You can't use that emblem as if you are part of this group or that you're somehow tied into them. It's fraud, and that's my opinion. And I think that the bottom line for military families, if you believe that you are entitled to borrower defense and you went to one of these for-profit schools, and you got to check out predatorystudent.lending.org, you can get your student loan payments reimbursed and you can get your debt forgiven. And I know everybody hearing that, I hear that and it's like startles me, right? Because I'm thinking, oh my God, student loans, right? They'll all be forgiven. The government has sort of mentioned that once they take these student loans and forgive them and reimburse, I believe, could be wrong, but I believe what the government is going to do, the Department of Education, is then going to pursue these for-profit schools for the financial dollars that these schools received.
Yeah. Meaning
the taxpayers will not be left holding the bag. It will be these for-profit schools have to repay for
what happened. Yeah, absolutely. Couple minutes to go, 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk. We're going to give you some of those schools. It might be easier for you to just go to predatorystudent.lending.org to see them, but we will give you some before the show ends. But Chris, I've said it a couple of times, you do have a personal connection to this. I don't want you to say too much.
No, I do want you to talk about it. Yeah,
to
I'm happy
share
to talk
kind
about
of where you went to school and is on this list. And when you see this and this comes out, how do you react to it as not necessarily as a lawyer at this point, but as a person who went to one of these schools and understands this case probably better than a lot of other lawyers who could be in on this because you're impacted by it? What's just your reaction?
My reaction is, and I am glad that you mentioned it, my reaction is when I read about some of the things that the government had discovered these for-profit schools were doing, it aligned with my experience. And I'm really glad that a lot of this came to light. I really am.
I think that's the best way to put it, because everyone's obviously, your experiences. You obviously know your experiences better than anybody. And when you can sit there and say, you know what, this makes sense, I think that's really all people need to hear and they understand it. Because if you experienced it and you agree with it, the people take your word. Chris, before we get out of here, give the people some of the schools on this list if they might hear one of the schools they attended. You can see the full list obviously at predatorystudent.lending.org, but give a couple of those schools for us if you would.
Sure. The main ones, again, that I have just seen on this list that kind of strike me as ones that I've seen on TV or billboards or stuff over the years: Argosy University, Corinthian College, ITT Technical Institute, DeVry, Le Cordon Bleu, Salter College, Kaiser University, Kaplan College, Ross University of Medicine. There was one other one on here as well. Hold on one second. Where is it? Carrington College. That's probably a good start. Oh, here we go. Everglades University, Empire Beauty School. Those are the two other. Again, there are so many, and I don't mean to pick on those for-profits. There are many more on this list. Those are just ones that I had heard advertisements for.
Sure.
I remember seeing ads on. But if you have a question, again, Google it, predatorystudent.lending.org. Check out the case Sweet versus Cardona. If you have a question about your military rights or benefits, you've got questions about the new Camp Lejeune, questions about how to file a claim or what happens with that potential litigation, give us a call. Our free consultation doesn't take, 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, it could take longer if you have more questions, but it's a fairly quick screening process. Again, it's free. If we decide to work together, we would sign a fee agreement. The only way that we get paid is if you get paid. It's on a contingency fee basis, and we advance all costs on behalf of our clients.
Absolutely. A lot of good information in this one. If you missed any of it, WOKV.com, Chris's website, brochulaw.com, video version of the show, thanks to our guy Justin at Nova Productions. And that's going to do it this week. Chris is back next week. We got more to do. We're also back on ESPN 690 this week if you want to check out where I'll be Monday through Friday, and then Sunday, obviously, right here on WOKV, protecting military families. Chris, thanks a lot. We'll do it next week.